So, ladies and gentlemen, a man who minces no words or vegetables, Mr. Gary Cooper.
All right, I think that was, you know what I call that, Kenny? Joke-like substance. It's not actually funny, but it sort of feels funny. So thank you for that jokish introduction. Yes, welcome to the Gary and Kenny Show. I'm the Gary in Waterloo, Iowa, and that is always the Kenny in Calabasas, California.
Who kind of feels funny.
And you don't mince words. You don't mince words.
That's a problem.
That's a fact.
Go ahead, Gary. Take it over, baby. Go.
All right. I want to introduce our guest because I ran into our guest several weeks ago at the Saturday Night... I have trouble saying that. Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live 50th reunion show. Hugh Fink and I did not work together, but you, Hugh, and me worked together at Comic Strip Live 35 years ago. That's when I first met Hugh.
Oh,
and when we bring him out, I want to mention a little anecdote from that time.
I think he's out. You're out, right, you?
I'm out.
He's out.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Emmy award-winning writer, comedian, producer, stand-up comic, actor, teacher, for heaven's sakes, Mr. Hugh Fink. Hugh?
Gary and Ken, this has been the most ornate intro I've had since my appearance on the Byron Allen show. Let me just say that.
Are you still doing stand-up?
I am still doing stand-up. It's funny to be with you guys today because in the past week, I've done 2 shows, and that's after having not been on stage in quite a while. But
How long? When you say not a while, how long was not a while?
Like, I would say at least a year, which, considering I'm a comedian for years and years and years, a year's a long time. And what I found is that the performing part is no issue at all. I can jump right on stage, but it's the material. It's trying out new stuff and remembering the old stuff. That's the challenge.
So you mentioned you guys at the SNL 50th reunion. How was that experience for you?
Overall, it was a great experience because I got to say hello to work colleague friends who I'd not seen, some of them in 10 years since the 40th reunion. And honestly, at this point of our lives, thinking, wow, will I see them again? Just because, 10 years is a long time. So it was sort of like reacquainting myself with people who I enjoyed working with, running into some unexpected guests who I'd worked with, not at SNL, but other places. So overall, it was a great experience. And of course, having a lovely conversation with Gary.
Right. What years were you at SNL?
The easiest way to answer that, Ken, is the Will Ferrell years. I literally started with Will and left with Will the exact same shows. So
Gotcha.
I'm proud to say that I feel like those years at this point of SNL history are considered great years.
They were. Well, first of all, as soon as you say that, the first thing I thought of was Cowbell.
And I was there for Cowbell. Will wrote it.
You were there for Cowbell.
I was.
Yeah. Well, what was that experience like for you? And I know that's a huge question, but people ask me all the time, and I say, well, it was great and not great. And I have specifics. I worked with Eddie Murphy, Billy Crystal, Marty Short. That was great. But it was also a very frustrating at times experience because you might write something you thought was great and it didn't get on the air. We would wear our heart on our sleeves. What was it like for you?
For me, Gary, it was incredibly empowering in some ways. And the notion that I could write something pretty uncensored and follow it through from my vision of it to when it aired. And with very little tampering, which I've always certainly at this point appreciate. And the thing that was both invigorating and frustrating was that if you got some things on the air, 1 or 2 things, that's huge and that was great. But then you're right back the next week to as if you accomplished nothing.
Exactly.
So, like in professional sports, I feel like if you're a 300 hitter in baseball, if you have a bad game or 2, the fans are still like, he's a 300 hitter. We love that.
Right.
But at SNL, you're only as good as your last sketch. And so...
Well, I was kind of curious about that because I would think, well, maybe when the show's not on or you're on a hiatus, it might be a good time for writers to stock up on sketches to kind of when you are in the, in production, you got stuff you can pull out of the drawer.
If only that were true, Ken. The way that works, when I was there, was that honestly, when we had breaks, and there were many of them where we didn't do shows, people just checked out. And
Yeah.
they needed that time to sort of invest in their personal lives, relax, maybe do other career pursuits. But no one really was spending time stocking up on sketches, which you could say they should have. On the other hand, so much of the show when I was there was determined by who the host was.
Exactly.
You could have 5 great sketches, but if those sketches didn't have a part for the host that the host deemed worthwhile, the sketch wasn't going to get on. So you really had to write stuff for the host.
What would you consider your 2, if not 3, or maybe just 1 greatest sketch accomplishment? Something that should be in the pantheon of great sketches.
I'll mention a few. So one was, I think that my Norm Macdonald as Larry King's have held up amazingly well over the years. And at the time I did them, no one had portrayed Larry King as the way I did. Right? So I'm extremely proud of those. And having Norm do Larry King, and I had to convince him that he could do a great Larry King. The other one that has now had a cult following, believe it or not. In fact, I was called by Vulture magazine. They did a whole article on this sketch a few years ago, was my Stevie Nicks Fajita Roundup, right? Which
I remember when it aired, but then I rewatched it the other day.
That's right. And, at the time, I just thought it was sort of an offbeat, weird idea. But what I didn't know is as the years have gone on, that sketch has developed not like cowbell following, but has a huge sort of following and love for it. So I'm very proud of that as well. And that was with Lucy Lawless, the star of Nina Warner. She did an incredible Stevie Nicks impression.
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
And she's probably 2 feet taller.
Yes, exactly. And New Zealand. And
if Stevie Nicks ever saw it?
So in the article, Ken, the journalist interviewed Stevie Nicks. I didn't know this, that for years and years, people have been mentioning the sketch to her, and she saw it and said she loved it.
Oh, that's great.
That was knowledge that I didn't have until the article came out. Yeah. And apparently she said in the article, she had considered actually opening up a restaurant in Sedona, Arizona, where I set the sketch called.
Wow.
Briefly, and I've talked about this on our show before, so I won't go into detail, but that's one of the surprises to me all the time, and it was going back to New York, that we actually were part of popular culture, that in ways that were invisible to us, we affected some young comedian or celebrity, or somebody saw something that we created, and it had a lasting effect. That still blows my mind.
It is mind-blowing because, as you guys know, a lot of comedy that you do does not have that effect. It's very disposable. Maybe you see it that week and then forget about it. But the joy of SNL is when something's really impactful, it can last a while.
Let's go back to Cowbell. Christopher Walken. He was unbelievable. Great host, right? Funny guy, the whole thing. So, okay, I'm sure you've been asked this question 1,000 times, because I've asked Gary 1,000 times and every other SNL person. Best and worst experience with hosts?
With hosts, sure. Well, in terms of worst, the one that comes to mind is Bill Pullman, who had just come off starring in Independence Day. It was the #1 movie of the year, of the week. I'm sorry. And he was red hot, and I wrote a monologue for him that killed at the table read and was approved to be on the air. And the premise, you guys, was that Bill Pullman would say, I'm going to take questions from the audience, because that's a tried and true format in SNL. And I had various cast people stand up and confuse him with Bill Paxton, Michael Douglas, Jeff Bridges, and that was the joke. And Lorne loved it, and it got huge laughs. Well, 2 days later, it's now Friday, the day before SNL's taping, right? I hear he wants to meet with me about the monologue. I'm like, oh, sure.
Right.
And I walk into his office, into his dressing room, I should say. And he goes, he's very, actorly, this guy. Like, hey, Hugh, so this monologue, what are we doing here? What are we doing? And I just very sort of plainly go, well, we're doing what's in the script. Like you did at you take these fake questions, and it's very self-deprecating, and it'll kill. And he's like, don't bullshit me, man. Don't be a used car salesman. And it turns out, you guys, that obviously his publicist or someone got in his ear and
Yes.
told him that it made him look bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, that's the antithesis of comedy.
Yeah.
Right.
The monologue is you want to be self-deprecating and
You
humble.
want the audience to like you.
People will like you. And honestly, Bill Pullman was not a household name. He's an actor, and people don't know much about him. So I tell this to Lauren, and Lauren, of course, is so used to this. And Lauren's like, go talk to him again. Explain to him this is going to kill. So I go back, and this time now he's like really got his boxing gloves on. And that's like, he called me, I love that he called me a used car salesman, that I'm trying to sell him some false bill of goods. Yeah. And he actually said to me, he goes, why are we doing this, Hugh? Why are we doing this? And I said, because it'll get laughs and make you look good.
Yes.
That is why we're doing it, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. But no, this guy insisted on cutting my monologue and going out Saturday and basically talking for 30 seconds with nonsense, having no jokes, and then saying we have a great show.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, one of the most forgettable monologues in history.
Well,
and Bill Pullman, even he's kind of forgettable. What was the last thing he
up to this point, I kind of liked him, but that's the case in point of if you find yourself having to explain why it's funny, the argument's lost. If the person can't understand, they'll never be able to do it.
And there's also no trust, right? He's like an actor who's he's a fish out of water because he's not a comedy guy, but now he's telling me why we shouldn't be doing this monologue. And he's telling the whole show that we're wrong and he's right.
Yeah. Well, we had a few of those. Robert Blake, Nick Nolte, who never actually did the show because he did get cold feet and just ran, but he didn't understand what we were creating. And if you don't, well, the audience sees that fish out of water.
Did you see the movie Saturday Night?
I did.
And?
What'd you think?
I thought that it was, if you're a moviegoer, it was highly entertaining as a matter of representing the truth. For me, it took way, way too many liberties. I'd say
did it ever.
Totally agree.
Right, so you agree with that.
All of it was real in the sense of the mayhem, but they should have just let it play rather than cue the costume designer. It was just...
Well, what cast member was portrayed as being likable? Every cast member that they portrayed.
Well, they missed on everybody. Belushi
came off bad. They weren't. I mean, Chevy Chase was obviously an asshole in the movie. Belushi was a horrible person. Everybody was a horrible person.
Yeah. Even
Billy Crystal. It seemed like he was annoying because he was going to get cut off the show. Even Billy Crystal, I think, came off negative. I disliked it a lot.
Yeah, understood.
Have you ever seen a movie about or a TV show about comedy that was actually funny?
It's a great question, Ken. The worst example, Ken, would be the film Punchline.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right, which I thought was inherently unfunny. And of course, what angered me was that they portrayed comedians having lockers in a locker room. Sorry, I've never worked a club that I wish we had a locker.
Yeah, I've never seen any of those things work. And I'll ask you guys this question. Have you ever seen a movie where it's like a period piece where they're portraying what's funny? Then, like, in a medieval movie, the court jester will come out and the court jester will run around and everybody's just going, "That's so funny! That's so funny!" Or that you're watching a Western, and somebody would say some line in the saloon and it would go,
laughs, right.
And I'm always thinking, were there funny people? Did they really laugh at the court jester?
So I have a story you guys will love about what you're talking about. One of my missions at SNL, I was always known for taking down celebrities. That was some of the things like Larry King. And so I wanted to take down Jay Leno. And my reason, of course, was because while he had been a brilliantly great comic, I didn't like what he did when he took over the Tonight Show and the type of humor,
None of us did.
Right. So you guys get it. So many times I tried to do a sketch where Daryl Hammond, a brilliant impressionist, did his Jay Leno, and my point of the sketch was that Leno's a hack. And I would write these hacky jokes. And Lauren, in his wisdom, goes, "Hugh, here's the problem. You think you're being so witty by taking down Leno with your hack jokes. The audience doesn't get that they're hack jokes. They just see Jay Leno telling jokes and laughing. So it's like it would get laughs, but for the wrong reason. I thought they were laughing at the stupidity of Leno's jokes, but no, the crowd was just like, "Oh, this is Jay Leno, and he's a funny guy. You're gonna laugh." So I can never make that sketch work.
Yeah, yeah.
A question for you. Going back into stand-up, compared to 35 years ago, and I remember your routine very well. And I'm honestly, Hugh, you were one of my favorite bookings because I always liked you and I loved your act. And I loved watching you play the violin as well.
Yes.
But now that you're bringing it back and you say you're doing new material, are you finding yourself at odds with what is called cancel culture, new consciousness, what plays now or then doesn't play now?
I will say that it's certainly on my mind every time I take the stage. And my bias would be the younger the crowd, the more I have to be careful of that. Because people our age and, even 10 years younger than us, they don't really have that censorship valve. But I feel like for various reasons, younger people might. Where, for example, you might remember the bit I did on Comic Strip Live, both of you, about the sarcastic Chinese waiter.
Yes, I think, as a matter of fact.
It's been quoted a lot, and Letterman
loves it. Very funny.
Thank you. But as you guys know, in the bit, I play a Chinese person with an accent as the waiter. Sure. So I think that if I get the wrong crowd in 2025, they may not like that simply because...
And not only that, they have their phone. They're going to Instagram it. They're going to put it on their social media.
Exactly.
I wonder what that would have been like for us in the old Comic Strip Live days there at the Laugh Factory, which is the place that brought down Michael.
That's right.
Richards.
On the other hand, Richards. I was going to mention to you, so last week, one of the shows I did was with D.L. Hughley. Great comic, right? He hosts his own show, and the audience was, I'd say, 95% black, and the comedians were 90% black, and then I was on the show, and I did my stuff that I would say is race oriented, and it killed. So it was actually great for me to feel like they're fine. Like if it's funny, it's funny. The audience, the fact that it was mostly African American and I'm a white guy. They didn't have any problem with that at all. So I think it's really a case-by-case basis.
It is, but I mean, I'm really kind of sad that we can't make fun of ourselves. I mean, I don't even think, do people go up and make Jewish jokes, even if you're a Jewish comic?
Yeah, between like Gary Goldman and Alex Goldman, I think that Jewish stuff is still very much accepted. Yeah. Now, if you're a comedian who goes on stage and talks about Israel, then you might be playing with fire because depending on what you're saying, you could get the certain audience members mad at you.
Did I hear correctly that you're teaching?
I'm teaching at Harvard University and Chapman University's Dodge College of Film and Media, which, these two amazing schools. And
one's in California and one's in Boston.
The way the Boston class works is I teach a semester course in advanced television sketch writing online, but then the Harvard students come out to LA for a weekend, and I do a writing workshop and have guest lecturers in person with them. So it's
what strikes me is you said advanced sketch writing. Is there?
That's funny you say that.
Is there beginning sketch writing?
I think Harvard uses that term meaning that you've had to have some writing experience and prove that you're a decent writer before you're admitted to my class.
So people submit sketches.
Yeah.
And you grade them?
Well, at all these universities, I do grade them. Generally, though, if you show up to my class, work really hard and participate, you'll get a B. But especially at Harvard, and I learned this after my first semester, they said you can't give out that many A's or A minuses. Like that has to be reserved for the few standout students, which is fair. Right?
Yeah.
Right, but it feels like a sterile environment because, as you know, it's not so much this on the written word as much as it is the execution.
Yes. However, from a writer's perspective, I can look at a sketch on paper, forgetting if it's Will Ferrell performing it or whatever, and just go, okay, based on what you've written, this has a decent chance to do well, as opposed to the greatest comedy actors in the world are not going to save this because your premise makes no sense. It's one joke. Nothing
Now,
happens.
have you had to say that to an individual?
100%. This is what I am known for, and that's, I think the students appreciate that.
And they still get a B?
It's still going to be. But again, in the arts, I feel like it's not math. It's not law school. I feel like there's a subjectivity to the arts. However, I think with writing, there are some objective standards in terms of sketch writing that they can meet. And if they don't meet them, then they're not going to do well.
Wow. And now have you had the other side of the coin, which is somebody who's just brilliant, and you go, wow, I should pass this on.
Yeah. Or it's like, for someone who's taking a college course in writing, I would say there's germs of brilliance. Like, there's enough there for me to go, if this person sticks with it, they definitely have their own comedic point of view. They're original. They know, and some people can't write jokes. For sketch writing, if you can write a joke, a setup with a punchline, that's going to help you. So if someone who's gifted at joke writing, I kind of reward that as well.
I like jumping around here. How'd you get the SNL job?
I have
Speaking
to
of
say,
writing sketches.
my David Spade is the reason I had the job, because
Really?
we were friends as comedians. We had sort of a similar, not style, but sort of a cynical, irreverent point of view. And so when David got the job at SNL, he would ask me to come up with jokes for Hollywood Minute, his famous segment.
Yeah, right.
And David, God bless him, he said, Hugh, you should write on this show. Like, you're funnier than half the writers we have here. So he lobbied for me. It took a couple of years, but he got me on.
Did you submit jokes and sketches then to
David?
David?
I never submitted jokes. I did submit a packet of sketches, which I had David look at and approve of stuff. And then I didn't get hired, and he goes, don't worry, you're new to them. It takes a while. And then a year later, I got hired.
Because people would send me their packages all the time. And I would say, hey, I can't get you this job necessarily. I have people that still don't talk to me because I got to SNL and I didn't help my buddy from so on and so forth, and so.
Right. And as you guys know, a lot of comedians, which Spade is a great comic, are too insecure to want to help people who they think are as talented as they are. So I really appreciate that Spade was like, no, you're funny, and the show could use you, I could use you, so that speaks well.
That's great, yeah.
Again, now going back to the party. I saw you, and you were a highlight for me. We ran into each other a couple of times, and it's so nice to have someone that actually wants to be talking to you when, Steven Spielberg is there and Robert De Niro is passing out on a chair over there.
Yeah, but they didn't get in the picture. They didn't get in the picture.
They didn't get in the picture. But
I saw the picture. I was so proud of you.
But I had a really good time. But I was overwhelmed. It's like, I don't know why would I be, I was overwhelmed. I was actually anxious, even though I stayed a long time to get out of there. And I looked for you toward the end and I couldn't find you. So I figured you must be in some private room with Meryl Streep or something.
Yeah, I stayed up all night and then basically went back to my hotel and headed to the airport because I had a flight early out. So it was insane.
Yeah.
But it was worth it.
So then, Hugh, you got on the plane where you went back to your artificially generated Los Angeles with the fake observatory, the Griffith Observatory.
Oh, you gave it away, Gary. You gave it away.
What gives it away is the fact that his head keeps getting mushed by the clouds.
I know.
So, life there in where you living? I mean, what's your thing? I mean, you're doing your online class.
Don't give us.
I live in Hancock Park, for your viewers who know. It's a lovely neighborhood. Kind of has some New York flavor to it, right? And a lot of comedy people who live in this neighborhood, I have to say.
Yeah.
In fact, the synagogue is Temple Israel of Hollywood is near me, and they call it Temple Sitcom.
Oh, really?
It's like Phil Rosenthal and Matt Weiner from Mad Men, and all these showrunners go to that temple. It's pretty funny.
So what club are you working out? Are you going to Laugh Factory?
I don't do the Laugh Factory. Melrose Improv is always my home base. And then with DL doing this show at the Ice House, that's a great place too.
Mm-hmm.
So those two clubs.
Yeah.
So you're writing, you're doing stand-up, you're teaching. Now,
Correct.
And we won't go into detail here, but Hugh and I connected on starting a little speakers bureau where people of experience like ourselves have stories to tell that can help businesses. Well, you know what? Here's a little commercial for that. Don't even have a name for it yet, but we're in the early stages of creating a consortium of
Wait, what did you just call it, though?
a consortium of professionals.
No, that's not a good name. You said
Well, I wouldn't call it that.
no, but you said bureau.
Speakers Bureau. That's
What's
what
wrong
they're
with that?
sort of
That's a
called.
good name, Speakers Bureau.
The speaker. There probably is something called the Speakers Bureau.
Well,
Well, if
steal
there
it.
isn't, well,
I
we're
like it, Gary. I
we're
like
fooling around with that.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
This
Hugh,
has been fun.
this
You-
has really been great.
And Ken, I want to pay a shout out to you. Believe it or not, you were kind enough to allow me to pitch the very first TV series idea. And here's how you did is because you liked my performances on Comic Strip Live and you saw my growth, it got back to me that you'd be open to certain comics pitching show ideas that you would then take, I guess, to Fox.
Yeah.
And I pitched you an idea that you loved that didn't sell, but the idea was called the Fink Files. And it was me doing field pieces every week, being a fish out of water.
That would have been a great.
That's a great idea.
Great idea. It was a great idea. Seriously.
It's still a great idea.
You thought that it was a great idea at the time.
Yeah, but here's the problem. It's still today.
Files.
The one thing that I want people to, it's amazing anything gets on because there's so many jobs in development which are, it's easy to say no to a project than it is to say yes. Because if you say yes to the project, then you have to go and try to convince other people. And then you have to get the budget. And it becomes a job. And actually you're putting yourself at risk because now you're going to be evaluated. If the show doesn't hit, you were a bad person. So
you're with the Fink
every
Files,
time
yeah.
going to up to Fox and the offices and pitching to these people, that it was just they would. I could see that they liked the idea,
Yeah.
but then they'd find some kind of generic thing where it just doesn't. I don't know. Let me, whatever, and then it just dies.
Right. And I think a lot of with comedy, a lot of shows, if you're pitching someone who's already a star, it's much, much easier to get them to say yes than if it's like an up and coming talent. Because the risk factor of, well, we don't know who this person is. And you have to explain, but that's how people become famous. You take a risk on someone.
It's comical. It's comical.
Right.
I read this. If they don't see the ROI immediately, in other words, banking on either the director or the star, it's just a no-go.
But then as soon as somebody takes the risk and it turns out to be successful, everybody goes, oh, we got to find the next new person.
Yeah, right.
And
But
then
that's
they
an
find
outlier.
somebody who sucks. And, I don't know. Yeah.
But it definitely was an education to me, but also was one of the things that was like, wow, this is really cool. I can come up with show ideas and at least have an outlet to see if they could get traction. It was exciting.
There was a lot of stuff like that. Steve Higgins used to write for comic, and then he wrote for other shows. Steve and it was the Higgins boys at that point. I did get an approval on a show for them. I think it was some kind of like rebel thing where they were interrupting and stuff like that. And they came in and it was a lot of fun. Dave Higgins would put his feet up on the desk and read a Playboy. Steve was the worker, which is why Steve Higgins went on to become. Was he the head writer when you were at SNL?
Right,
okay. And that show almost got on. But again, just at the point where they had to give the money, they just didn't. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Hugh, how often do you practice the violin still?
At least once a month. Thank you for asking. I still love it. Like this weekend, my favorite new violinist, Augustine Haidlick, is playing with the LA Philharmonic. So I'm going to see him perform. So I still very much keep up with classical music and love it.
And you opened for Jon Stewart at Carnegie Hall, did you not?
One of the highlights of my career.
It has to be.
Wow.
And Alan King hosted and brought me on. So Alan introduced.
Yeah.
I did 25 minutes. Then John came on, and John's opening line, center stage, Carnegie Hall. He looked around and goes, "What a shithole!"
But didn't you even come out and say, "I want to show my parents that all those years of lessons have finally paid off"?
Of course I did, and of course my parents flew in from Indiana. We're in the audience.
See, that's why I like you. You're a Midwestern guy, just like me. You went to we did the comic thing. We went to New York. I went back to LA, but now I went back to the Midwest. So, Hugh, I'm a little older than you. That's your next move.
I may be following.
Come join me here.
Very possible.
Yeah.
And
Hugh,
Gary,
it's so great to see you.
When my dad arrived at the Carnegie Hall concert, he goes, "Well, what time's the concert? It's 4 o'clock here, huh?"
Hey, I know what to put on your tombstone. Here lies Hugh Fink. It's eternity here. What time is it there?
Brilliant. Love it.
Yeah? All right.
Love that. Oh, my God.
Allow me to do our sign off. Do you mind? Hugh,
Come
stay
on.
with us till we say goodbye. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the Gary and Kenny Show. Our very special guest, Hugh Fink, today. You can catch us on all the popular podcast platforms, plus on our own YouTube channel. We'd love it if you'd go there, give us a thumbs up, tell us what you think. And we're on streaming TV on Roku called DBTV. See you next time. So long.
Thank you. Great to see you. Bye-bye.